A lot of people who invest in property through superannuation make this very rookie mistake. And that mistake is that they chase cash flow before they need it. They think buying a commercial property inside of their superannuation is the answer to passive income. And from my perspective, if you're under the age of 50, that couldn't be further from the truth. And the reason for that is because cash flow gets taxed and capital growth, until you sell, does not. And over a long period of time, compounding capital growth absolutely destroys cash flow that gets taxed. And a property that produces cash flow but stays the same value over a 10-year period is a dead asset. And I'm going to run you through a client example in this video where that exact thing happened. My name's Jack Henderson. I've built a $50 million portfolio before the age of 30. And in this video, I'm going to run you through how a $1.5 million asset can turn into an $11 million portfolio. That'll set you up for an incredible retirement. And this is without doing anything fancy. And if you stick around to the end, I answer real investor questions on exactly how to play the game of property to make tens of millions of dollars. Now let's get stuck in. Super. And inside of super specifically, we're going to be talking property. Now, again, this is just my personal preference and it's what I do and it's what our clients do. It's not what you should do. You should go and get personal financial advice from someone way smarter than me. There's this thing, right, in real estate as a whole. So on one thing, we've got residential property, resi, and on the other side, we've got commercial. So we've got residential and commercial. Now, people think that, and I see this all the time, and I don't agree with it. When buying in super, we buy commercial property because commercial property produces cash flow. It'll pay the debt off. And when I retire, this property will give me my tax-free income. Versus residential property generally doesn't pay for itself, especially in super, because you're paying slightly higher interest rates. But, it's more of a growth-focused asset. You buy a really good resi asset versus a really good commercial asset, you're going to get more growth. So if we break it down into two, we got growth here, we got cash flow here. Now, I'm not saying that commercial property doesn't grow. I'm saying generally residential property grows better. Now, again, we also have to take into consideration that most people buying in super are buying at $1.5 million or below, okay? So again, for context, $1.5 million for a resi asset gets you a great asset. $1.5 million for a commercial asset gets you an okay asset. I'm talking major cities here, right? I'm not talking fucking bumfuck Idaho. You don't pay tax on growth in super until you sell the asset. And if you sell it after you go into pension phase, there's potentially no CGT on growth and you get out of it tax-free, potentially. In commercial, you do pay tax on surplus cash flow. Tax inside of super is 15%. Okay, so no tax on growth, but tax on cash flow. If I look at those things right now, a lot of people go, I want to buy a property, I want to buy a commercial property, and this just happened with another client of ours. They were using another company, which we put a stop to from what the asset they bought, but I bought a commercial asset in Melbourne that sold over 10 years ago for the same money that they are buying it for. So in the example I used before, again, focus on growth. They paid the same price that the current owner or the current seller bought it 10 years ago. The rental income hadn't grown because we checked the rental history, and it had been rented for 70 grand a year to be rented for 90 grand a year. And now I'm pretty sure it was rented for around that $70,000 a year. So it hadn't had much rental growth. And they were essentially just buying the property because they said, well, I think the purchase price was circa 1.1. They were getting 70 grand a year. It's like a 7% net yield. Great asset. It'll pay for itself, pay itself down. Amazing. But these people bought the commercial asset, the people that they're buying it off, for the same price 10 years ago. So it's had zero growth over that time. And the cash flow that it'd be producing on top of the repayments would be next to nothing. Whereas in a resi asset, pretty hard to go wrong with a $1.5 million residential asset in any major city, good suburb around Australia. You would be hard pressed to find a good resi asset that hasn't had at least 50% growth over that period of time. Most properties over the last 10 years have probably done more than 150% growth. Let's say for my own situation, up until I'm probably 55 to 60 years old, I'm 100% in the residential bracket. And then once I get to 55, 60 years old, I'm starting then to plan, and I'm going to move my portfolio from growth to cash flow. And the reason for that is because up until 60, based on current superannuation rulings, you can't access your super anyway, unless, something happens. Like you get a payout or permanent disability or that shit. But like up until a normal person retiring 60 years old in today's economy, you can't access your super, but at 60 you can. So any cash flow that's being produced by a property up until 60 doesn't actually matter anyway, because it's then going to go back in your fund. You're going to pay tax on that money. It's going to sit there, and you can either reinvest that money or it can just sit there as cash. Whereas with a resi asset, it can just continue to grow. And then once you get to 60, you can sell it down, which is what I do. So I would go and buy a house. Like I said, let's use the $1.5 million example. Let's say that on that property, we can get something that's going to give us a 5% yield. So it's giving us around $1,500 per week in rent. Okay, let's say we've got 80% debt on that. We've got a $1.2 million mortgage. Let's just say we're paying 7%. 7% on 1.2, 70,000 plus 14's 84,000 in interest. And we're bringing in rent of 1,500 times 52 is 52,000 times 500 is 26. 78,000. Can't spell, can fucking count. So we got 78,000 of income, 84,000 of interest. So we're negative 6,000 plus our repairs and maintenance and all that job. The property's probably costing us 20 grand a year to own. That's including some principal repayments, some repairs and maintenance plus property management fees. And obviously Jack Henderson is over here, making his $30,000 max contribution into super. So we've got a little surplus there of $10,000 per annum. And that property over the next, what am I, 29 right now? I've got 31 years before I can access it. That property is going to slowly pay itself down. Let's assume you get a 30-year mortgage. That property over that period of time will pay itself down to zero. So in 30 years time, that property's gone from being 1.5 million to 3 million over 10 years, to 6 million over 20 years, to 12 million over 30 years. Now, whether you believe these numbers or not, I don't really give two fucks. Just do whatever numbers you believe. If you think the property's going to go from 1.5 to 6 over 30 years or 1.5 to 3, whatever, I've just gone, it's doubled over 10 years to 3, it's doubled over another 10 years to 6, it's doubled over another 10 years to 12 million bucks. So in 30 years, we've got a $12 million asset that's got $0 in debt. Now remember, $12 million in 30 years time is not $12 million today. So it's got $0 in debt. Let's say that Jack is 60 years old. Let's say that over the next 30 years, they increase the cap of what you can have in your superannuation as a tax-free. I sell down that property for 12 million bucks. I pay 0% CGT, assuming all these rules remain the same. 0% CGT. The only thing I pay as a selling agent, which is say 2%, $120,000. And I end up with, give or take, 11.8 mil net. Okay? Then with that $11.8 million, I would go and invest it. And let's say Jack just goes and invests it in something like an ETF or a managed fund. And let's say that gives me a 5% return on my money. That means on my $11.8 million, let's just get rid of the 8 and pretend that's not there. On my $11 million, I'm going to be getting $550,000 worth of income. And who knows what the rules in super will be in 30 years time, but it could be completely tax-free. It could be taxed something, but that is what I would focus on. I would focus on growth all the way through until 60, sell down, ideally pay no or minimal CGT, transfer that money then into something which is more liquid, and that then does give me more cash flow. And like I said, don't get caught up on the exact numbers. You do whatever numbers work for you. But it's all about growing, getting to a debt-free position. The property's paid itself over that time. Plus, I've used my contributions, sold it down, transferred it, generating income now at 550 grand a year. 550 grand a year based on 30 years. That'd be like earning in today's dollars about 275-ish thousand. So that's 275 of today's money, inflation adjusted out at 2.5% per annum over a 30-year period. That is how I would do it. And look, you could over a period of time. So let's say that this is 10 years and this is halfway between here is 15 years. You could then sell that property maybe at 4.5 mil. Based on current rules, you would pay some CGT. The CGT you would pay is at a 10% tax rate because you've owned the asset for longer than 12 months. And then what you could do is you could potentially split that into 2 times, say, $2 million cash amounts, and then go and buy 2 more assets for the next 15 years. So there is some cool things that I think about doing, as opposed to just buying one and holding it forever. You could buy one, hold it for 15 years, sell it down, pay out the debt, split the capital that you've got into 2, go buy 2, and then hold those for another 15 years. But yeah, growth, then cash flow. Not cash flow, and then that's it. Buying commercial real estate is very, very different from residential. If you don't know anything about commercial, you can get stuck. Like, the leases are very complicated. For example, I've been doing a lot of videos recently with childcare centers that we've been buying. And a lot of these childcare centers are brand new, right? Developers have built them. They obviously go to the trouble to get the tenant. They go get a national operator, places like Fit Kids. They bring them in. And obviously when a childcare center opens, they're generally not at full occupancy. So what happens is you have, and again, this is something that not many people know. You've got your lease. This is your lease here. And let's say that the property is rented for 420 grand per annum. Okay, that's the lease. You're mad, 420 grand of income. That's great. But then they'll have a side deed to that lease. All right. And this is called an incentive deed. So what happens is, if you're uneducated, all you see is this $420,000 lease and you go, great. When you're going through your due diligence, you just look at the lease and you go $420,000. What people may not see is the incentive deed to the right of that. And what that incentive deed is, and that's to the developer, when they sign up the lease, they go, you're paying $420 a year, but on this incentive deed, we'll give you 24 months rent-free. We will give you X, all this stuff, which sits separate from the lease. And the reason it sits separate from the lease in some instances is because then when they take this to the bank will give them funding on the lease, but the incentive deed is obviously between the developer and the tenant. And you might buy this, not know this is in place, and then not have any rent for 24 months because this tenant's negotiated a separate deed with the developer to not have to pay any rent until they get fully occupied. And this sort of shit happens all the time in commercial. So when you're going through due diligence, you don't just want to get the lease, you then want to get bank statements to show that the rent's been going in over this period of time. You want to get any incentive deeds. There's so many things that go into a commercial property. You want to understand if it's not a new asset and it's an old asset, you want to understand what the lease history has been, not just for the last 2 or 3 years, but long term. You want to understand the operator that's in there. You want to understand the property itself and how long it's been owned and when it's been sold in the past, what it's been sold for. All these things are very, very important, and they can go very, very wrong when you buy commercial property, especially if you're buying something like a retail or, a hospital, like a retail strip hospitality, which is what this thing was. Not ideal, very risky. So any questions around my strategy when it comes to like buying property and superannuation, why I focus on growth in the early years versus cash flow, or anything to do with commercial property?
Someone said, at what super balance do you look at getting into property through super?
For me, I would generally not do anything until there's like 250, 300 in there, generally from what I see. People would have like $250,000 to $300,000 in there as a combined balance, but before they're usually looking into property. That does a few things. That gives you a really good balance to go and buy a good asset and not have a small balance and be limited by what you can buy. It also then gives you enough money to have there as a buffer as well, so you're not using all of your money. Plus you've got setup costs and all that shit. Buy, develop and sell, or hold for first or second development. I look at, someone like the great Harry Triggerboff when it comes to developing, and the reason he is so wealthy, outside of being an incredible developer, is because he holds so much of his stock or his inventory. And obviously you need to have the capacity to do that, right? Because what most developers don't have any cash flow. Their business is developing. They generate next to no cash flow. They might get some development fees and shit like that, but it's, in the grand scheme of it, not a lot. So when they sell or when they materialize their gains, that is their cash flow, and they take some off the table and they reinvest the rest. But if you can run a couple of businesses side by side that are in the same sector and you can generate your cash flow from, like you, Marty, it would be your demolition business or, strip out business, that generates your cash flow. As long as you can afford to hold those assets, you can potentially avoid paying GST on those properties if you hold them for a long enough period of time. You can obviously leverage off those properties. You can claim things like depreciation on those properties. And you then get the long-term growth on those properties. And you aren't subjected to the market then, because with a developer, obviously you've got a feasibility, you buy the property today, it's approved in this time, you build it in this time, and then you sell it. And what you're hoping for is that the market is at the same level or better than when you bought the property. But that's not always what happens. So if you can hold, like Triggerboff, for example, I listened to an incredible interview with him. I don't know how long ago it was. It was at an AFR summit. And someone asked him a question around like, oh, you have something to do with these financials. And it's like, this year your revenue is down by 40%. Why is that? And Harry said, well, I choose when I want to sell my properties. And this year isn't a very good year in the property market. So why would I sell anything? Which means because he's holding stock, he then gets to choose when he materializes it and obviously dramatically increases his overall margins. Now he's at an extreme level, but if you don't need to sell, I wouldn't sell. If you can hold them long term, I would hold them long term. Now, when I say that though, what a lot of developers do is they don't actually care where they buy their sites. All they care about is their feasibility. So if you go buy a shitty site that's on a main road or something that isn't going to be a good long-term investment, then you probably don't want to hold it for a very long period of time. But if you have that mindset going into the development and you say, hey, if I did want to hold this property, what are the things I'd focus on? Solid location, good quality build, not cut corners, all that jazz. Then they're the developments you hold long term. Bottom line up from investment property one, $220,000 of usable equity, salary of $174,000, $250,000 sitting in my offset. How can I scale? And I want to keep some safety buffer in the offset. Well, let's fucking do old Nick. Here we go. This is old Nico. Can you tell me how much your property is worth? And then I'll work out what your debt position is. So income is 74K, cash 250, 1.14 million, debt is 660. Bang. So first thing is, see this number here. Everyone fucking forgets about this number. This is the number one thing, income. You are never going to grow a huge portfolio and scale without scaling this, okay? So investing is one piece of the puzzle, income is the other piece of the puzzle. You solve the income equation, you solve any equation. I know it's easy for me to sit here and go, but like, it's the reality. If you want to grow extreme wealth, you need to solve that, okay? So that's the first thing I would focus on. 174, great income, but how do I get that to 350? How do I get to the 700? How do I get to the 1.4 million? And the answer to that question is add that much value to society. Cash, great. Reality is, how much cash do you need sitting in your offset account? Do you need 250? Do you need 125? Do you need 100? Do you need 50? So I'd work that out, and let's say that it is 50 grand that you need sitting there as a buffer. 200 of that money needs to go to work. If this here is your owner occupier property, which I'm assuming it is, I would use that 200 to pay off this 660, and I would pay it down to 460. It's called debt recycling. So now you've got 460 of owner occupier debt, and you've got 420 of usable equity. And then obviously I would use some of this equity to go and buy a property. Based on your 174 of income, I would say you probably got the capacity to buy a property for like 850, 900. So property number 2 would be 800 grand. Out of this, you would need about 200 grand. So 160 would be for deposit and 40K for stamps. And you'd also then have some surplus equity sitting there. Obviously, if you go buy this in your personal name, then based on this income, you are capped, which means you won't be able to go buy any more property. And that's why I said you need to solve the income equation. Now, obviously, you could maybe ring fence this inside of an entity, wait for it to obviously start paying for itself, and you can recycle that equity, but it's not going to be really fast. Okay. The other thing you could do, I don't know if you've got a partner or not, Nick. Fuck me, Dad. What was that? A human? That is terrible, Jack. Oh my gosh. Look, it's got a cock. You could add another person, obviously, maybe a partner, husband, wife, whatever your jam is. And ideally, you can, go find someone that also earns another 175K of income. And then again, you've doubled it. You've got 350 of income now. The portfolio can scale larger. But like, you've got the first piece, which is the equity piece. You've got good income, but your income is relative to your portfolio size. So you could go buy one more right now and, turn this 1.14 into $2 million worth of portfolio. But if you want to get that from 2 to 4 to 6 to 10, this is the thing you need to focus on. So there you go, my friend. That is how you scale. You may not have liked the answer, but that is the reality. So someone just said, I'm not smart at learning things, but I want to make a fuck ton of money by 25 to 30. Where should I start? I wasn't smart, and I'm still not smart, I just focus on things that I know, I would remove that like 25 to 30 thing out of your mind, because when you put like these, and I've learnt this from Gary Vaynerchuk and Hormozy, when you put these like made up time stamps or frames in your life, you make decisions based on that, right? You're like, I want to be rich by 25. And then what happens is you make decisions like that, and chances are those decisions are not good decisions, because they're not decisions that you would have made if you were thinking over a 20 or 30 year horizon. They're decisions you make over a 2 or 3 year horizon, and they're generally short-term decisions, and they're bad decisions. So don't think like that. Think, I want to be rich as fuck, and would I be rather worth $1 million at 25, or would I be rather worth $100 million at 40? And the answer to that question is, I would rather be worth $100 million at 40. So you want to make decisions like that. The second thing I would focus on, so here, how about I write this down? Long-term thinking is the key. The second thing, and I know that is so generic, but it's so fucking true. The second thing that I would focus on is you need to find not something that you're smart at, find something that you are passionate about. Something like you can get on fucking YouTube and have 50 people. How many people are on there? There's 80 people there. How many are on my Instagram? 160 people. That is not a huge amount of people, but I am here. I've got lots of enthusiasm. Joel is here. Joel's enthusiastic. And I just love real estate, right? So I'm really passionate about it. It obviously comes out in my content, and that's why people like it. And because I'm passionate about it, I do things to learn more about it, because it's my passion. And then it makes it easier to learn, right? So I can tell you that in school, I was the worst. I hated learning. I could not sit in a classroom. I just despised it. When I got out of school and I then chose the things that I learned about, I love money, so I was learning about money. I love investing and financing and all that stuff, so I was learning more about it. I found real estate, and I love real estate or property investing. And that's how I did it. So find something you're passionate about. Generally, it's good to find a passion that also makes you money, just as an FYI. If you find a passion like badminton, very hard to make money out of badminton, okay? You can, but it's probably harder. So find something that you're passionate about, think long-term, and then shadow someone or work for free, get a mentor, whatever you want to call it. But essentially get exposure to someone that is doing something that you love and you're passionate about, and that's obviously, done the things that you want to do, because again, following in someone else's footsteps is much, much easier. That's literally it. And if you do that stuff every single day and you don't make stupid short-term decisions like, oh, I'm 23, my mates have got a sick car, I'm going to go and get a personal loan and get a sick car. Oh, my mates have moved out and they're living in these apartments and fucking got birds and all this stuff, I'm going to go do that stuff. That's dumb. And that's why your friends will be poor forever. I guarantee it, okay? I didn't do that. And most successful people that are younger in life don't do those things. So, there you go. Hope that answered your question.
I'm looking at purchasing my next investment property. I don't own my own home yet. Should I pay down my loan on the current investment?
Here we go. I like to do a side-by-side comparison of everything. So, paying down the debt. Okay, what are we going to achieve there? We're going to achieve lower LVR or less debt. That's what you're going to do when you pay down. You're going to have probably more safety because you've got a lower level of debt, less interest, and in the short term, if you've got less debt and the property's worth whatever it is, you've got more equity. But the downsides are you're limited by a $720,000 asset growing in value, and you're only saving the interest on a $360,000 loan. Buy investment property too. What are the upsides? Larger asset base. And if you didn't believe that you were going to get more growth and you said, oh yeah, but I could also lose more money, then you probably should sell the $720,000 property, right? Because if one property goes down, two are going to go down. But if you do believe they're going to keep growing, then you're going to have more growth, larger asset base. You're going to pay more interest. But the interest that you're going to be paying is less than the growth itself. So let's just assume that you went and bought one more 720 property. You'd use the equity from here to buy that, and you'd have 1.4 million bucks in assets. So you should have double the amount of growth. You'll obviously be paying more interest, but again, you'll be growing more. Less safe, but with less safety, you have more upside. So one is choose the safe option, or what seems like the safe option, or choose what seems like the higher risk option. There is a finite amount of money you can save. So if you pay this off to zero, you can only save the money that you're no longer paying on interest, right? Are we focusing how much money we can save, or are we focusing on how much money we can make? Because remember, there is an infinite amount of money that we can make. Now, obviously, it depends on how old you are, what your goals are. You don't have a home by the sounds of it, so you might want to buy one of those down the track. But I would much rather have $1.4 million of property growing in the market at 5 to 10% than $720,000 in the market growing at 5 to 10%, because I guarantee you'll make much more money out of that, assuming the marketplace continues to move the way that it has. So buy a house down the track, but do it after you've built your investment portfolio that's giving you the stability, and then go buy a house. How to structure multiple properties to be able to keep tax down. The short answer is you're going to get the most short-term tax benefits out of owning property in your personal name, right? Hello, that's Jack. Eee. So let's say that you've got 3 properties, all owned in your personal name. There's a few things that you can claim. Expenses, which are things like interest, repairs, and maintenance, etc. And then you've also got depreciation that you can claim. And all of these things end up going back to you as an individual, right? You have expenses and you have depreciation. These are the 2 biggest things that you can claim. You do have land tax. There is no way to avoid land tax. There are certain ways to maximize the land tax thresholds that you get. In New South Wales, for example, you can buy properties within a company structure. And if it is structured correctly, you can potentially get a new land tax threshold inside of each company structure. But by doing that, you forego the ability to claim these expenses against your personal name because the company owns it, not you as an individual. In Queensland, for example, inside of a new discretionary trust, you get a new $350,000 threshold for each property that you buy. But again, you forego these things. You can't always win, all right? You gotta pay the piper at some time. Now, the best way if you're gonna do it in your personal name to minimize your land tax is to go, well, how do I expose myself to an amount of property inside of each state that allows me to stay very close to the land tax threshold? So this property, for example, might be in New South Wales. This property, for example, might be in Queensland. This property, for example, might be in Adelaide. Victoria now, as fuck land tax, you pay it from, I think, $50,000. So you're going to pay that on it anyway. So that's the way that you can do it. In New South Wales, you might be able to have 2 properties before you hit the $1,075,000 threshold. In Queensland, you might be able to have 1 or 2. In Adelaide, it might be the same. So you can generally get to many $1 million worth of property around the country without hitting land tax threshold. I haven't even spoken about my favorite place in the world, which is Perth. It's a great place. So that's the way that you do it. You start spreading things across states, and that's the way to avoid it. People like Silly Jack just own everything in New South Wales. But you eventually, when you get a portfolio that's big enough, you're going to pay fucking something. So suck it up. Okay, so I hope that helps. So the best way to do it is to split it between different states if you own them in your personal name. If you are happy to forego the personal deductibility that you get here because you save on land tax, you can put these properties inside of entities. Scenario here, house value at 1.4 mil, 400K in the bank, and we've got a 400K loan. So we've got 0 debt on that property, plus another 300K. And the question was, waiting on advice to use the 300 grand. Okay, so I'm assuming the $1.4 million property is an owner-occupier. So right now, that's a big tick. You don't want to go and ever buy another one of these and increase your debt, your non-deductible debt. Now, with this 300, there's a lot of things that you can do. You could then go and use it to buy a $0.1 million property. You'll use about $220 for deposit, and then you'll also use about, say, 80 grand for stamps. Because this property will be then 80% leveraged, if you get a property that's giving you a 5.5, 6% rental yield, this property will pay for itself. Now, depending on how big of a portfolio you want to build, you've paid off a $1.4 million property, I'm assuming you're somewhat conservative, you might not want to go buy 10 properties. If you did, you probably wouldn't buy this in your personal name. You'd probably buy this inside of, say, a trust or a company, or it's what I would do. I'm not saying what you should do. Let's say you've used that's the 300 grand gone, but then you've still got 400,000 sitting in your offset account. Let's say you did want to go buy another property and buy it in another trust. You wouldn't just pull this 400,000 out and use it as the deposit, because then what you've done is you've pulled it out of the offset that's attached to the owner-occupier property. You would actually pay this off, that $400,000 loan. So you've got a $0 loan. Actually, you may not pay the whole thing off. You might pay it down to like $5,000. So the loan facility is still there, because if you pay it off completely, there's no loan facility, which is annoying, because then you got a whole new loan facility. So you'd probably pay $395 down, and then refinance that 395 out. So then it's sitting there as a separate loan split of 395K. And then if you use that 395K then for the deposit and costs on this property, this now becomes tax deductible because it's being used for an investment. Whereas if you pulled this $400,000 out of the offset and use it as the deposit on this, you're just paying $400,000 of cash off an investment property, which is obviously deductible. And you've just pulled $400,000 out of an offset of an owner-occupier property. So now you're paying interest on non-deductible debt. That's what I would do. And then eventually you would get to a point where you no longer want to work or have to get up. And then you would probably sell these residential properties down, cash out all of the gains, and then go and invest the big lump sum of capital that is left for cash flow. All right, my partner and I have 5 properties in Victoria. Our broker said we can get 2 more pre-approvals for $650 and suggested opening a trust. Would you recommend we diversify and buy interstate? Yes, I would. I would buy, if you've already got some good exposure to Victoria, 5 properties, there's a lot of exposure to Victoria. I would definitely buy in another state for sure. I'd probably buy New South Wales or I would buy Queensland. Another question here says, why should I purchase older properties and add value to them rather than purchasing a new property and claim the depreciation and minimal maintenance expenses? It's a great question. So when you buy a brand new property, you're paying a premium for that brand new product and you're paying for that depreciation. When you buy a brand new property, you're not getting it at a discount, you're paying for that depreciation. Sure, you don't have any maintenance, that's great. But with an established property, you're paying for the land, not the dwelling that it sits on, because the dwelling's fully depreciated, right? So all the value is in the land itself. And then if you spend money on that property, you're increasing the value of it, okay? So you're not just spending money to spend money, you're increasing the value. You spend 100, you add 200,000. And essentially, you then get to claim the depreciation off the value that you've added, okay? So you still get the depreciation benefits. But yeah, I'd much rather buy a property that I can add value to versus pay a premium for a property that I can never add value to, and then I'm just claiming the depreciation back on the premium that I've paid. So that's why. Purchased a 2-bed, 2-bath unit in Eastwood for $730K. First home buyer, moved out, rented for $800 with an updated desktop val. Property is up to $785. Individual income of $170,000. I've got $70,000 in cash available and my current loan of $685. What should I do? Purchase the property, mortgage in possession for $150K below ask. Well, the $150K below ask means fuck all because I'm probably asking too much. You can see that you paid $730, desktop was $785. It's probably a generous desktop valuation. The only option you have is to do nothing or to go and invest more. And if you are young, like not investing more is just costing you money. Not today, it's costing you money in 20 years time. So the reason I've been so aggressive since I've been investing at 18, like I'm 29 now, is because like, what is the alternative? Let's just like sit there and wait. So like right now, if you've got a property, it's got some equity in it, you've got cash, not using that cash to go and invest more means you're just leaving money. The future you is going to be more upset that you didn't do something. So short answer is I would go speak to a broker and understand what I could spend and obviously look at my cash flow, make sure I can afford another property. And then I'll go and invest because like I said, short-term you will not like it because you're going to feel poorer before you feel richer. Long-term you, or you in the future, will thank you for it because if you buy a really good asset, history shows us that they're going to be worth a lot more than what we pay for them. So, and you're not going to be able to save your way to retirement. So if you want to retire or not have to work at a period in your life, the more you do right now, the higher the chances you have of not having to work. What is the process of applying for an SMSF property? Let me run you through the process that I had. So let me talk through the SMSF process. Now, this is the Jack Henderson process, okay? This is just for me. This may not be right for you. This is not financial advice. This is just Jack Henderson's process. Don't take it as gospel. Go and do your own research, okay? So here we go. This was Jack. Jack had his super. It was in CBUS, which was my industry fund. So that is where my money was sitting. It was in CBUS from when I was in construction. Step 1, what I had to do is I had to go and I had to speak to my accountant. I had to set up an SMSF, okay, which is just an entity that has to be set up. Now to set that up, you've got to do a few things, or I had to do a few things. You got to get a statement of advice. You have to spend money, obviously. But essentially, you set up a self-managed super fund. And then once that is set up, I went to the CBA and I set up a bank account. I had my CBUS, I went to my account and I set up my self-managed super fund. Once that was set up, I took all the documentation to CBA and I set up my bank account, okay? Then what I did was I moved all this money from my CBUS account. For illustrative purposes, I had 100,000 there. I had to send $100,000 from CBUS to my new account. So now I had my new self-managed super fund that had a bank account with CBA that then had $100,000 in it. Okay? From there, went and spoke to a mortgage broker and said, hey, Mr. Broker, I want to buy a property. And he said, great, Jack, I need all these documentations. Okay? So he went and got those documentations. Then what I had to do was get a pre-approval, which is this little bit of paper that says, Jack, you can buy a property. That's really, really good. I also had to set up a thing called a Bear Trust, which is just another entity, because when you are buying a property in self-managed super fund, the property does not sit in the self-managed super fund when it is bought. It sits inside of the Bear Trust, and the debt is also tied to the Bear Trust. And when this property becomes debt-free, that's when it goes into the self-managed super fund, not before then. And the reason for that is because it's got this thing called a limited recourse borrowing arrangement, which means if you don't pay your loan back inside of the super fund, they can't come and bankrupt the super fund. They can only come into the Bear Trust and take what's in there. Anyway, and then you buy a property inside of a Bear Trust, and the property, then you get tenants to come and live in there. Yeah, tenants. That's awesome. And the tenants pay your rent, and the rent goes into the self-managed super fund. And then, you know, Jack also pays his money into his self-managed super fund, which is his contributions, and the tenants pay there. And then I've obviously got a mortgage that comes out of there as well. And that's how you do it. Okay, so my process was I had to, obviously, industry fund, I had to set up a new self-managed super fund with my accountant, had to get a statement of advice, sign all these documentation. Then once it was set up, I had to set up a bank account. I chose to do mine with CBA. Then I had to transfer all my money from CBUS into that bank account. Then I went to my mortgage broker and I said, hey, broker, I want to buy a property. Then I went and got a pre-approval. Then I got a Bear Trust. And then I got tenants and bought a property, and it was great. Okay. And now just what I'm saying is it may not be great for you. Okay. So go and speak to an accountant. Go and speak with a financial planner, because you may not even need to set up a self-managed super fund. It may be a dumb idea and you're not Jack Henderson. So what you should do if you want to chat with, you're not going to chat with me until you're a client, but you'll chat with my team, and they're more skillful than I am. You can go to the links on any of my social media channels. There's a book a call link there. Go to our website, henderson.com.au. You can book a call there. And then you'll speak with our team, and they're amazing people. But yeah, I only work directly with clients. So if you're going to expect me on that first phone call, you'll be unfortunately let down. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. If you want to tune in to the next live, you need to head over to my profile, tap on the live tab, and you'll see when the next live stream is happening. Make sure you click on the notify me tab, and you can tune in live and you can ask any question around your personal circumstance, and I will do my best to answer it live right then and there.